Good morning, I'm Charlie Sykes, and Sunday Insight starts right now. Well, welcome to another post-election hangover edition of Sunday Insight. In the week that was, well, another soul-crushing Packer loss, another death in the Milwaukee County Jail. And Washington and the country adapt to the new political reality. It is Trump in charge. Well, let's start right there. How much clout will Wisconsin have in the new administration? A lot. As the transition begins, reports of division, lots of speculation, but one thing seems clear. Wisconsinites are going to play key roles in the new year. Speaker Paul Ryan was unanimously renominated as Speaker of the House and is poised to begin pushing the Republican agenda through Congress. Kenosha's Reince Priebus is tapped as the new president's chief of staff, where he will help shape the new administration. And Governor Scott Walker is elected chairman of the Republican Governors Association at a time when the GOP is flexing its muscles at the state level. Joining me on our panel this morning, the Milwaukee Community Journal's Michael Holt, State Representative John Jagler, political strategist Lynn DeBruin, and research fellow at the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, Colin Roth. Well, let's start with the relationship between Reince Priebus and Paul Ryan. How important is that going to be in determining what happens over the next 6 months?
Oh, it's going to be essential. I mean, the chief of staff is going to be the conduit between Paul Ryan and his agenda and what President Trump will be signing and passing and what their priorities will be for the new year. So I think that's just going to be a really crucial relationship going forward, particularly in those first 100 days. Okay,
but this Ryan-Trump relationship is on again, off again, you know, hate, love, and, you know, how long is that going to last?
Well, I think they're bound to clash at some point. I guess the question is whether it'll be sooner with something like a transportation or infrastructure bill, or whether it'll be down the road.
Okay, so what are you seeing here? I mean, it is kind of surprising. I mean, Wisconsin has been at the center of the political universe for so long, and given the fact that Trump did not do well here earlier in the year, you might have thought it was going to be a detour, but there's a lot of Wisconsin clout in this in the new regime.
Well, I think there is, but I think we have to take it a little bit with a grain of salt. I mean, after all, we are talking about Donald Trump here, and the minute there's a clash between Ryan and Trump, things could, you know, blow up. I think Priebus will have a huge role to try and mediate between the two, and that's where I think we might see some progress.
Well, of course, then you also have this other dynamic where, you know, last Sunday, Trump appoints Steve Bannon, who is, you know, the former CEO of the alt-right enabling website Breitbart News, as a co-equal. So how does Priebus balance out that thing with Bannon?
Priebus has got to go first, and I think that's the advantage that he has. He's going to, that first 100 days, he knows how this works. He's going to have the boots on the ground, the relationship with Ryan. Plus, don't forget, there's going to be much more influx of people coming from Wisconsin to help out. That togetherness, just the intimate knowledge that those have together and how things work, how we did it in Wisconsin and reforming, that's going to play a key role in those first 100 days. So he's got the advantage first up.
See, I think you're right about that. In terms of getting things done, you have to get things done through Congress, and Priebus is more wired in there.
Right.
So Bannon can come up with the great concepts, but the guy that can actually get bills through in that first 100 days is going to have to be Reince Priebus. So what are you seeing so far? Anything surprise you? Any tea leaves that you've read so far?
Well, I mean, this will be an ultra-conservative cabinet, which is really scary in many respects. But, you know, at the same time...
What did you think?
Well, with Donald Trump, you don't know what to think.
Well, that's true.
I remember 10 years ago, he was a Democrat. I mean, he was a liberal. And now he's ultra-conservative or somewhere in the middle. Or we don't know. You know, only thing I'm not surprised at is the nepotism going on with, you know, what's putting his family in there. More unqualified people. But I think the key is it's going to be Paul Ryan. Reince Priebus is in an essential role. He will navigate. But and Walker is a team player.
Right.
But he and Paul Ryan will clash at some point.
At some point, but let's go back to this point about the first 100 days. You know that the president will have the ability to issue a lot of executive orders. There'll probably be a Supreme Court nominee within the first 100 days, maybe even before he takes office. But will the strategy be the Wisconsin strategy? Will it be the Scott Walker strategy, which is move fast and hard, get the big legislation through, the tax reform bills through, maybe immigration, whatever they want to do? Will they do that right away? or will they pick and choose, or will it be like, okay, let's just go?
Well, I think that's a central question that's probably being negotiated right now, is what will the priorities be? Because, yeah, Ryan can pass a bunch of bills through the House. Things slow down in the Senate, and maybe in those first 100 days, you're really tackling only one or two things, whether that's an infrastructure plan or whether it's Obamacare is a big question.
Now, the Democrats, of course, having to decide, how do they handle this? Do they cooperate with Trump on some things? Do they not cooperate? Where do they draw the line on, confirmation votes? By the way, I'll bet you your fellow Democrats wish that they hadn't nuked that the 60-vote threshold, because this was the brilliant idea of Harry Reid. Right. It used to be that you needed 60 votes to get, somebody through confirmation. He decided that, no, we're going to run this place forever, right? Right. So, but will Democrats draw a line at, say, Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General nominee? Would that be? Would you think it would be a good idea for them to draw a line there? Try to oppose that?
I think
you got to fight somewhere.
Yeah, no, I think that they will raise and challenge him, and if he comes up, if his answers, have at least some merit to them and some responsibility to them, I think he'll go through. I think they're going to have to pick their. I think they're going to have to pick their battles very carefully.
Well, this guy's not qualified to be. Federal
but
judge.
You don't think the Senate will elect the Senate will approve their own?
They have to draw a line in the sand. They have to make
Democrats
Democrats. They have to make themselves relevant. Otherwise, they're just going to just roll over the whole United States.
Do you think it's going to be Sessions that they're going to?
It's going to be. You have to start with Sessions, because he's the most obvious. And if he couldn't get appointed in another position, you're going to let him get through here? No.
Well, what you're referring to, of course, back in 1986, he was appointed to a federal judgeship, and he was rejected because of some allegedly racist comments. So,
not allegedly, he's a racist.
Well, so if you don't know what goes.
As his banning, come on. Let's be honest about this.
You can throw that around, but I would also assume the Democrats are going to draw the line because, of course, it plays to their narrative. And this, of course, raises the question, though, will Democrats who are making noises about cooperating with Donald Trump say on infrastructure, will they actually do it? I'm thinking no. Nah. What has your glass half full? What is your glass half empty? Let's go around the table. Michael Holt, you are first.
My glass is half full because the state finally closed the infamous Travis Academy School. Travis was an embarrassment to the school choice program and, more importantly, failed black children. My glass is half empty because I think DPI plays games with inferior schools like Travis, allowing them to continue operating to disparage the choice program.
John Jagler.
My glass is half full because Charlie finally invited me to be on the show. Glass is half empty because the invitation came during No Shave November, and I promised my son I wouldn't for charity, so you got to look at this.
That's not that bad. Linda Bruin.
My glass is half full that the Milwaukee County Pension Board terminated the pension of convicted felon Dennis Deitcher. It's half empty because they originally approved continuing his benefits, and it took outside pressure to change their minds.
Colin Roth.
My glass is half empty because occupational licensing laws in Wisconsin are fencing out opportunity for thousands of workers each year. It's half full because reforming occupational licensing looks to be a priority next session with bipartisan potential.
Well, my glass is half empty because cry-bullies at UW-Madison tried to shout down conservative speaker Ben Shapiro there last week. It's half full because the vast majority of students at the speech wouldn't let them do it. Chalk it up as a victory for free speech. Up next, the Bucks make a statement about the presidential election, and one player in particular is speaking out about it. Well, the fallout from that election continues and spreads to the world of sports. ESPN reported last week that several NBA teams, including the Milwaukee Bucks, won't be staying in Trump hotels in Chicago and New York because they don't want to be associated with the new president or his policies. Mark Lasry, one of the team's owners, of course, is a big-time donor to Democrats, but the move seemed to have the support of some team members. Bucks forward Jabari Parker, a Chicago native, said he was proud of the Bucks ownership for taking a stand. He said, "I'm pretty proud for my owner representing us and representing himself and not trying to represent our organization with controversy. You don't want to endorse hate. You don't want to endorse racism. You don't want to support controversy. I'm really proud we won't be staying there because I couldn't be comfortable around him and his businesses. I know he's our president, but it's going to take some time." And he has not publicly come out with an apology for anyone or for the things he said. And I'm connected to all the ideologies he disrespects. I was named after a Muslim. My mother is basically an immigrant because she came from Tonga. Her rights as a woman, she got less pay. I'm black. And he said some controversial stuff about black people. When it comes to me not supporting Donald Trump, it's pretty much correlated to the things he has said. So, John Jagler, now we have this intersection of sports and politics, and the Bucks are boycotting Trump hotels.
I wish the owners would be a little bit mature about things like we were in the legislature. That was not an easy bill for me to vote for. It would have been much easier in my district to say, no way am I giving this playground for billionaires to play their billionaire game. But you know what? When I look at it, I took the votes aside, took everything aside, broke it down, and said it truly was cheaper to keep them.
Yeah.
And it was the better thing to do. It was the more mature thing to do. So I voted for it. Yeah. But boy, oh boy, this is, you talk about alienating your, I don't understand why you want to do this. And those are pretty hard words to throw around. Too.
Okay, Michael Holt.
Jabari Parker is my new hero. Yeah. To be young and this articulate, to be community appreciated in this kind of realm.
Hotel. The hotel is not the president. I mean, is this what we're going to have now? It becomes a litmus test whether we go to Trump hotels. I'm not a Trump fan, as you know.
Well, you have to separate Trump, the president, from his business interests anyway.
Okay, well.
And everything Parker said was absolutely correct. Sometimes you got to take a stand. You cannot dismiss that even though it's a sport, it's entertainment, these are still Americans.
Okay, so maybe Jabari Parker should have been more active in turning out the vote in Milwaukee as opposed to simply not going to the hotel.
He did. Look at NBA players.
I'm with Michael on this one, 100%. If you don't like what a business owner is doing, one of the ways you show your displeasure is by not patronizing his business or his children's businesses. So I don't have any problem with it. Is it going to change Donald Trump? No. May it upset some of the fans?
So now basically, well, your thoughts on this?
Well, there's one of the pitfalls of electing someone with a giant business empire is they do become conflated. I think
this is uncharted territory.
Yeah, but if I recall, I think Michael Jordan always said something like, the other political party, buys shoes too. And I think there's something unfortunate here about, particularly because the Bucks owners are huge Hillary donors, and then they make this decision, and then they're alienating and saying we don't want to be, we don't approve of some of our fans' votes. I think that's unfortunate.
See, the worst part about this is I think most people go to sports because they want to escape politics. They want a little bit of entertainment, and now everything is political. Everything now has to be seen through that lens. You may not want to hear it, but we'll tell you anyway. Let's hand out some unsolicited advice. Michael Holt, you're first.
Well, John Humphreys held his press conference to announce his candidacy for state superintendent of DPI at Coffee Makes You Black. Maybe the incumbent should Google that Central City location. In fact, maybe you should find Milwaukee on the map.
John Jagler.
My unsolicited advice is for the Assembly Democrats. As we start another session, not every issue you disagree with is going to ruin Wisconsin. Mysteriously, our majority keeps growing. Less rhetoric this session, please.
Linda Bruin.
Well, if you're appalled by the presidential election, it's time to get more involved, not less. We need to stand up and stand together to protect our constitutional rights and the Constitution and promote the diverse America that we believe in.
Colin Roth.
My advice is whether you supported Donald Trump or not, we should all encourage him to pick the very best people for his cabinet. Don't stigmatize good people for wanting to serve.
Well, yes, so-called fake news is a real problem. So my advice is if your uncle emails you a story or you see something on social media, check it out before you forward it, really. Up next, it's been a case full of dramatic twists and turns. What now for one of the defendants in the Teresa Halbach murder case? Brendan Dassey won't be going home for the holidays. Dassey, who's now 27 years old, is serving a life sentence for the 2005 murder of Teresa Halbach. Dassey's uncle, Stephen Avery, also is serving a life sentence for the murder. Their case, of course, was the subject of a widely viewed documentary, Making of a Murderer. And last week, a federal magistrate had ordered Dassey released because of evidence that his confession may have been coerced. But Attorney General Brad Schimmel quickly moved to block the release, and on Thursday, the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals agreed that Dassey should remain in prison, at least for now, while appeals are still pending. Did they make the right call? What do you think, Linda Bruin?
I think absolutely. First of all, this is a real hard issue here because obviously, in my mind, Avery is guilty, guilty, guilty. And the issue is, though, his nephew and his nephew's IQ. And if he was coerced into making the confession, it still might be accurate. He might have told the truth, but whether he was coerced or not. And so that's where the fight's going to be. It's going to be over this young man and whether he stays there forever or whether he's going to get a second chance.
Okay, now you watched the whole Making of a Murder.
And all this is going to do is lead to more episodes of Making of a Murder as they continue.
So they
this
win.
On. They win. They win. And you know, the tragic part is, as someone who was very close to the disabled community, disability community, I think, let's face it, he's borderline right there. It was very troubling to watch that confession. It was very, very troubling. But I agree with Lynn. You need to separate the Avery and Dassey part of it. But I think they made the right decision by keeping him in until the justice prevails here.
Well, it was interesting that the appeals court did not explain why they stayed it. They just said we're going to stay it. I don't know. So many people who have watched this series and believe it. This guy was obviously a pawn.
Yeah.
But they should have fried him. They should have fried him.
Okay, but you see, the thing about it is that what the appeals court did, it was like, okay, it's under appeal. Let's play out the appeal as opposed to just releasing him. It was actually a strange decision by the magistrate, wasn't it, just to release him while the appeal is still pending?
Yeah, I agree.
I don't quite understand
when you have a
that.
life sentence for murder, you got to get that right if you're going to overturn an appeal and let someone out of prison. I think you got to get that right, and you got to let that appeals process play out.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing, of course, is that this case has become so emotional because of this video, which, again, and I'm not criticizing the people who, believe that Stephen Avery is innocent because all they know is perhaps what they saw in this video, but the people who have followed the evidence over the years, are quite adamant that, look, this was very selective in the portrayal. There might have been things that were a little bit sketchy here or there, but it is, of all the people in the world who now is the subject of all of this attention, Stephen Avery, who is really, I want to talk about a distasteful human being, an awful thing. And the Brendan Dassey thing, the court system will work it out, and if there was, injustice, if in fact, that confession was coerced out of him, then he ought to be released, but let the process play out. We don't have a criminal justice system that is run by Netflix.
Right.
At least not yet. So what is it you don't get? Let's go around the table. Michael Holt, you are first.
Well, what I don't get is why a major pharmaceutical announced a new wonder drug which can reverse heart disease. And then it revealed it would cost upwards of $14,000 and won't be covered by insurance.
John Jagler.
What I don't get is all the people on Facebook on my timeline saying they're buying newspaper subscriptions because good investigative reporting is now needed, that Trump is a victor and the president. Wasn't that always needed?
Linda Bruin.
I don't get Bob Dylan's response to being awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature. He didn't respond to the Academy's attempts to reach him and won't attend the awards ceremony. Dylan's unexplained rudeness is puzzling.
Colin Roth.
What I don't get is why everyone cheered for MPS last month when new report cards revealed this week that 42 schools still fail to meet expectations.
Well, what I don't get is why Democrats continue to stick with the same old fossilized leadership. Now, you've heard the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and hoping for a different outcome. So why are the Democrats doing it in Washington and in Madison? Next on Sunday Insight, our panel picks the winners and losers of the week. But first, here's your morning news update. It's time for our panel to pick the winners and losers of the week. Michael Holt, you are first.
Well, my loser, in addition to the level-headed rights previous, Donald Trump is looking at people like Giuliani, Sessions, and Flynn to fill out his cabinet. Lord, it's going to be a long 4 years if we make it through the first one. My winner, Howard Fuller, and the volunteers who for 7 years now have provided hundreds of children with an intensive summer reading program that brought them closer to being proficient at grade level.
John Jagler.
My winner, deer hunters, who thanks to Secretary Stepp no longer have a DNR that's working against them every year. Things like online registration and eliminating back tags will make it easier. Enjoy the ritual and be safe. The loser, supporters of the educational status quo, who tried to use our votes on reform as a weapon against us and failed again. Look for the legislature to keep pushing to make sure that every child has access to a great education.
Linda Bruin.
Well, my winner is Reince Priebus, whom I don't often agree with, but who gets kudos for being the GOP's longest-serving chairman and being named the president-elect's chief of staff. Whether he'll come to regret his new job is another matter. My loser is David Clark. Our Homeland Security needs strengthening, but not by his unconstitutional proposals. Clark would allow authorities to question American citizens without an attorney, hold citizens indefinitely, and try them in military tribunals, not the courts. If this sounds familiar, it's what the Nazis did in pre-war Germany.
Cullen Roth.
My winners this week are state Republicans who, after historic wins, saw no change in leadership among their Democrat counterparts. That likely bodes very well for the future. My losers are the news media that tried to create the impression of chaos and failure in Donald Trump's first week of transition. If you're wondering why much of America tuned you out this year, last week was a case study.
Well, my winner, cheesehead domination. Whatever you think of the election results, Wisconsinites are going to play a huge role in the next administration in Congress. Paul Ryan, Reince Priebus, Scott Walker, Ron Johnson. Guys, make the most of it. Loser, Packer fans. A season that began so hopefully is turning into a horror show, and hopefully the team can turn it around tonight. If not, it's going to be a long, cold winter around here. Thanks for joining us and joining me for my radio show Monday morning on News Radio 620 WTMJ from 8:30 until noon. Have a great week.